Hello again and welcome to the Humanist Celebrants podcast. My name's Simon Smith and today I am delighted to be joined by Jane Blackman. Jane is based in Littlehampton and she is perhaps the most celebrated and awarded celebrant I have ever met. Jane, you are truly the doyenne of celebrants. There are more awards on your website than there are canapes at a wedding.
Well, my goodness me, what an introduction. Thank you, Simon.
Well, it's great to talk to you, and thank you very much for spending this time with me. I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions about your work as a celebrant, but let's start with the question I ask everybody. Why did you choose to become a humanist celebrant? What called you to the work?
Well, I'm often asked this question, and I always say that it really was a happy accident. It was never in the life plan. I was a head teacher and I just happened to stumble upon the opportunity to train to become a humanist celebrant. Primarily it was funerals that I was interested in. And then, of course, I branched out into weddings and baby namings and vow renewals. So I was interested in humanism as a head teacher. I was really interested in teaching children about different religions and also about living a good life without religion. So I wouldn't say necessarily that I was, I didn't label myself as a humanist, but I was kind of edging in that direction. And it all just kind of fell into place for me. I have no regrets, no looking back. I am just so fortunate to do the job that I do. I absolutely love it.
Let's talk a little bit about why you love it. What is it about the work that you do that gives you so much satisfaction and so much reward?
Because it's all about people, and people fascinate me. I just get a real buzz out of getting to know people, finding out about their stories, telling their stories. I mean, that's what ceremony is all about for me. Authentically appreciating people and their lives. And
it is a great privilege, and authenticity is a word that keeps coming up in these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And in order to deliver a ceremony with authenticity, you've got to be interested in the person that you're talking about.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So how do you find out about people? How do you get under the skin of couples that you're working with for a wedding or the family of the deceased? What are the questions that you ask?
I think you have to tread quite carefully in the beginning, particularly with funerals, because you're dealing with people who are naturally, very upset. You have to be quite gentle with your questioning with funerals, whereas with couples for weddings or families for baby namings, I think you can approach the questioning a little more enthusiastically from the start. People are much more willing to come forward with the information that you need because they want that ceremony and they're really looking forward to it and they're excited about it. With a funeral, of course, nobody wants to be planning a funeral. So you have to read people, have to be able to read people. And of course, that drives the sorts of questions that you ask. But there has to be plenty of questions to get under the skin of the person or the people that you're talking about in your ceremonies.
On your website, you talk a lot about the uniqueness of the ceremonies and the fact that each one is individually crafted. And I know that a lot of us work towards this sense of making sure that the ceremony is representative of either of the couple who are getting married or the individual that's died. It's quite often a tension, I think, certainly with people that I've worked with, that they want it to feel like a funeral or feel like a wedding, but they also want it to be their own and they want it to be unique. How do you tackle that with people, that sense of allowing people to put their own stamp on something, to put their own mark on something, but at the same time as it being familiar enough for everybody who's perhaps a guest?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that does come up time and time again. People's expectations of the particular ceremony that you're planning with them will have such a bearing on your conversations. And I think finding out from the outset what their expectations are. Sometimes people have very little expectation. They anticipate that it is going to follow a set pattern or a set structure that they've witnessed or been a part of before. And often people are surprised that we have so much freedom in our ceremonies, that we can truly personalise the ceremony, and that really there are no rules. Yes, there are traditions. Yes, there are structures. And if people want to make the ceremony feel quite traditional, or have a structure that they are familiar with, of course we can do that. But I always encourage all of the people that I work with to take as much ownership as they feel comfortable with a guide from me if they're not sure. And you would know in your ceremonies work that you experience meetings where people have absolutely no idea whatsoever how it's going to be and what to include, and then the opposite end of the spectrum is the person that's absolutely adamant that it must have this and it mustn't have that, and you just need to go with that as celebrant, and be a sounding board, and be prepared to make suggestions. And again, it's about reading the situation so that the suggestions you make really do feel fitting for that situation and that person or that couple.
I think the bottom line for all of us is that, we want to offer what is a good ceremony.
Yes.
Something that is that does the thing that is needed by the people in that room at that particular time. Now, obviously, in the case of a wedding, that's great. It's a public declaration of love, a public declaration of vows. In the case of a funeral, it's about saying farewell and helping people transition, if you like, from one place to another. Can I ask, how important for you is it to have a sense of transition in a ceremony? So we talk about rites of passage, the rite of passage between being unmarried and married, and the rite of passage between being, a wife to a widow. And quite often ceremonies help us through those transitional points in our lives. And I wonder if that's a part of your ceremony or not.
Yeah, I think that a ceremony, a good ceremony, will acknowledge that there is a big change afoot. I always say that I state the obvious, I guess, that a funeral is a difficult event to go through, but it's such an important part of the farewell process. It's a time when we can all stop and, be away from the things that usually take our attention and time, and think purely about that person. It's verbalizing what's happened. It's making observations about the changes that have taken place and the changes that will continue to take place. So yes, I think good ceremony acknowledges that transition, and talks about it.
A lot of what we do in ceremony, I think, is provide people just a little moment in time to step off the wheel of life, get out of the hurly-burly, and stop and think, think about some of the stuff that you've just been talking about. Close the door on the hurly-burly and consider matters greater than ourselves. And that's a lot of our work.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I think to look back on someone's life is not something that we do at any other time. A funeral is often the only time that you step off the wheel and reflect upon a life. And so it has to be right. And it has to be authentically appreciating that person.
I always ask my guests on this podcast to suggest a reading. could be something that you've had to read, that somebody suggested to you, or that you have chosen for a ceremony because it was in that moment at that time for that person the right reading, and perhaps has lodged in your memory. Did you manage to conjure one up?
Yeah, gosh, isn't it difficult when you're asked this question? There are so many amazing readings that I've come across over the years, and yeah, virtually an impossible task to pick one favourite. But I have chosen one that a gentleman who planned his own funeral chose himself. But what I love about it is that it tells people what to do, and this man loved what it was telling people to do after his death. And it's called Instructions, and it's by Arnold Compton. Have you heard it, Simon?
I'm looking forward to hearing it now.
Okay. Instructions by Arnold Compton. When I have moved beyond you in the adventure of life, gather in some pleasant place, and there remember me, with spoken words old and new. Let a tear, if you will, but let a smile come quickly, for I have loved the laughter of life. Do not linger too long with your solemnities. Go, eat and talk, and when you can, follow a woodland trail, climb a high mountain, walk along the wild seashore, chew the thoughts of some book which challenges your soul. Use your hands some bright day to make a thing of beauty, or to lift someone's heavy load. Though you mention not my name, though no thought of me crosses your mind, I shall be with you, for these have been the realities of my life for me. And when you face some crisis with anguish, when you walk alone with courage, when you choose your path of right, I shall be very close to you. I have followed the valleys. I have climbed the heights of life.
What a fantastic reading it is an instruction. Go forth, embrace life.
Absolutely. Make the most of every day. And this man absolutely did. We had his celebration of life, and the family wanted it called that. Not every family want a celebration of life. It depends on the circumstances and the people. But this man's life was to be celebrated, and we finished his ceremony with that piece that he had left instructions to be read. So I just love that, and I've used it since many times.
So Jane, I always ask people for a piece of music as well. We often get asked to play pieces of music which are very familiar, but sometimes we get a little gem, something which is unusual, personal, or just appropriate, something that we've never heard before. What's the most unusual and therefore perhaps the most interesting piece of music you've ever played at a funeral?
I love music. I adore music. I have music on every day, all day when I'm at home working and pottering about. So music in a ceremony for me is so, so important. The most unusual, I suppose it was something that the family thought was a bit risky, might offend people, and they had quite a dark sense of humour. So we had Another One Bites the Dust by Queen. But the piece of music that I've chosen is one that surprised me given the circumstances, because this was played at the funeral of a woman who was only 41. And she had died very suddenly, unexpectedly, and the circumstances were tragic. But her family were so determined through that tragedy to celebrate her life. And so we had a very well-known song by Jackie Wilson. It was amazingly uplifting to play that piece at this woman's funeral. She had died far too young, and it was, a very difficult situation. But I had huge admiration for the family, because they wanted to truly celebrate by playing that piece, which for them summed up the love that they felt for their daughter, sister, partner, and the love that she, they were learning to live with her love, the love that she left despite her physical absence. So it was really beautiful.
Perfect. Jane, it's been an enormous pleasure talking to you. Thank you for taking the time to join me this afternoon. It's been a delight finding out about your work and your practice, and I'm sure that for anybody who is looking to find a celebrant will be feeling very, very comfortable in your very, very safe hands. Thank you for taking part.
Simon, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Really lovely to chat to you. Thanks.